Welcome everyone to the Monday, April 25th Public Works Committee meeting. I am Michael Mraz, Director of Public Works. I will be opening the meeting today as we have a couple of new members here. So I will call the meeting to order at 5 o'clock p.m. First item on our agenda is to approve the minutes from the February 14th, 2022 Public Works Committee meeting. Seeing that Sarah was the only one present there. Do you have any omissions or edits that need to happen?
I'll make the motion that we approve the minutes from the February 14th, 22 meeting with no changes.
I'll second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Next item is comments and suggestions from citizens present. I think what I'll do is I'd just like to welcome Joy Knudsen and Mike Kennedy to the Public Works Committee. They are officially posted to here and other various committees, but welcome. Like I had put in my email, Dean and I will bring you up to speed as fast or as slow as you would like. We don't want to inundate you with a lot of information, but we do want to bring you up to speed with at least what's going on this summer, and we'll touch base on that later on in the meeting. So with that being said, thank you for being a part of this committee. A lot going on. And then, is there any questions as far as off the top of your head is with the committee, or it follows the Robert's Rules of Order? The next item, the first item on our new business, we will be appointing a board chair. So there'll have to be a discussion on that, on who would like to run the meetings from here on out. Other than that, the other thing that I want to touch base on is introducing our new engineering tech, Maverick, who is sitting down in the audience tonight. Yay. Maverick's been on board for, is this your third week already? Yep. Third week. So he has been shadowing Bolton & Mank, our consulting firm, out on the Hillcrest Carmichael intersection, and then Dean has been bringing him up to speed on a lot of other projects that we got going on here this summer. So Dean, do you want to maybe touch base on just what he's been doing over the last couple of weeks?
Yeah, so I'm very excited to have Maverick on board here. Obviously the first 2 weeks are always, got the fun onboarding, stuff, get all the paperwork done and that kind of stuff, but we're really putting them in the fire, so to speak, too, with construction starting last week on the Carmichael Hillcrest project. He's also going to close out a couple of our other things we've got going on. He's also going to, this is one of the many reasons I'm happy to have him on board, is that he's going to be helping us with doing inspections for permit work, like breaking permits, retaining wall permits, that kind of thing that we just don't have time to do with us, that kind of stuff. And then moving forward, when we do have more projects starting up, that he'll be kind of the main guy for the city on new projects coming up. Probably not every new project coming up, because that would be a lot, but we're super happy to have him, and I'm sure there'll be other things. He'll be kind of the miscellaneous stuff comes up. We'll send Maverick out to go collect some data, or go talk to somebody, or that kind of thing. So super happy to have him on board. So
Welcome.
Aboard.
Glad you're here.
Glad to be here.
All right, so seeing that there's no other citizens present, we will move into new business. Item 5A, discussion and possible action to appoint a Public Works Committee chair. So, obviously this is a nomination between the three of you who would feel comfortable operating the meetings. Basically, it's consulting with myself and Dean, putting the agendas together. If there's certain things that you want to see on the agenda, obviously any board committee member can bring forward stuff to put on agenda, but would go through the chairman. Obviously they're running the meetings. If for some reason you can't attend, a vice chair would do that. But for the most part, we really haven't run into that problem in the past. We kind of work around your schedule. If you need to bump a meeting up 1 week or push it back a week, we can work around that. So with that being said, is there any inclination on who would like to take over that role? Don't all jump at once.
Who feels the most strongly motivated to nominate themselves? Or wishes the nomination? Joy?
Well, I want to make one comment, is that I believe, reading the municipal code, that actually the mayor is supposed to appoint someone.
Okay.
But it hasn't exercised their prerogative, and maybe not for a few years. It's code 23-7B, where the chair shall be designated by the mayor.
Okay.
But I'm assuming that designation should have happened before the appointments were approved at council. So, I mean, we're a friendly group. And again, like you said, we're all collaborating together and sharing ideas.
Yep. So I guess
We rely on you guys. This is a heavily expertise-based committee, it seems to me, you know, what you're providing us.
Yeah. So having said that, what I would recommend then is to follow the code. We should have the mayor appoint a chairman at the next common council meeting so that we're making sure that we're following the code and we're doing it correctly, and I can run the meeting tonight. I have no problem doing that.
Either way.
Yep.
I mean,
That's fair. So with that being said, do you want to still kind of nominate a person to be appointed? Or do you just want to have the mayor just draw your name out of a hat? Or
I'm comfortable with any of those options. I mean, or if
yeah.
wherever we're at, and
Should we just talk to the mayor?
We can talk to the mayor.
Yeah,
Yep.
because we won't have another one of these committee meetings before the next council meeting anyway, so.
to your recollection, did he appoint anyone in the past? He didn't.
No.
It was self-chosen.
Yep.
So, I mean,
Yeah.
again, I don't mean to be a stickler. I just was
can't
reading
remember.
that and I thought, oh, that's
No,
interesting.
that's a good point.
Jim Weber was our board chair when I first got here, and I don't know if he was appointed or if he was just kind of self-nominated. And then when he left,
Yeah.
Paul DeZiel
Sure,
graciously stepped
stepped
up
in.
and just took his place for the
Yeah.
couple of months.
And
Any of
Sarah,
us three, I mean, is the burden too much for any of it? I'm willing to take that role. Again, I do like the idea of going and seeing what the mayor's direction is, but we don't want someone appointed that said, I don't have the time, I don't
Sure.
have the
Okay.
Sure.
want to, so.
I mean, and
Well-
one could argue Sarah has served on the committee before.
Yeah.
We're newbies,
I
but
agree.
right, it is a responsibility.
Yeah.
Certainly so.
So we'll
And-
touch base with the mayor and we'll just have him, if you're all comfortable doing it, we'll just have him make the appointment then. Okay?
And it could be a good point of reference for all the other committees. I think in my year here, when there have been changes, it has been all nominated and done kind of within the committee structure. So that's a good point. I certainly hadn't read
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
It just
and
kind
maybe
of jumped
that's
out at
maybe
me.
it's even just an update to that code if
Right.
we're going to make a change.
True.
Okay. All right. No problem there. So we will.
So we're
Sorry
not
for
gonna
digging in
arm-
there.
Yeah, thank
We're
you.
not going to arm wrestle tonight then, okay?
Yeah, right. All right, so I have no problem leading the meeting tonight. So if there's no further discussion on item 5A, we'll move into item 5B, which is discussion and possible action regarding the 3rd Street Laurel Avenue project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, this is great.
All right, so coming to you guys tonight with an update on the 3rd Street and Laurel Avenue project. So just for your reference, that project stretches from right out here at the corner, 3rd and Walnut, up the hill, around the corner, around the bluff, up to Blakeman Boulevard, which is just past the monastery. So the project, as we are intending for the project to happen, would be to, excuse me, essentially grind up the existing pavement, leave the existing curb and gutters mostly alone, leave the existing sidewalk mostly alone except for some spot repair, type stuff. Repave the street essentially, and then replace the failing retaining wall up and around the corner, the bluff area that's holding up the wall. As you guys and anybody listening to this tonight probably been up there and realized that the retaining wall that is holding up the road is not holding up the road very well anymore, and so it needs to be replaced. Initially, we had estimated some costs for that retaining wall work up there, and I'll tell you why kind of we're talking about this here in just a second. But so anyway, just to rewind a little bit too, we applied for a local road improvement program, or LRIP grant, for that project up there, and that was based on the estimated costs that we had estimated for the road and the wall and that kind of stuff. And so we were successful, thankfully, in getting that grant, so that's great. We're very happy to have that grant. It's approximately $493,500, which is awesome. That is approximately 50% of the project cost as it was when we submitted that grant. And so it's a 50-50 match, that program is. And so, however, there's a few problems that we still have to work through. One being, and this is probably the biggest one, is that the retaining wall costs are a lot higher than we had initially anticipated. So initially when we scoped this project, essentially we believed that we could replace portions or, kind of repair almost the retaining wall that's up there right now. And then as our consultant has been working on this, they did a whole bunch of surveys, of the bluff and of what's going on up there. And as they've dug through it, they've come to the determination that we can't save that wall. And also, replacing the entire wall is very beneficial too, so that everything is done. That wall hopefully will be there for, 50, 75 years, something like that, in good standing if we replace the whole thing. Initially, when we scoped out the project, we were anticipating that we wanted the wall to essentially last another like 20 or so years until we would fully rebuild the street all the way up and through there, that kind of thing. So overall, the project will be a longer lasting fix than what we had initially scoped, which is a good thing, but the bad thing is that we just didn't account for that extra money to do that. And so that's a big part of what we're talking about tonight. The other thing is that with higher oil prices and everything right now, the repaving portion of the project is also going to be a lot higher than we had anticipated. To give you some frame of reference, 2 years ago, our industrial street mill and overlay project, the price of asphalt, it's by ton, and so it was $73 a ton in 2020, which is pretty reasonable. We reached out to Monarch Paving, who does a lot of the actually most everything in town for paving, just to get a sense, with all the stuff going on right now, what are we looking at realistically? Not holding you to this number, but, can you give us some idea of what we're looking at for, asphalt prices right now? And they said that they're at between $100 and $110 a ton right now. So that's a 50% increase in 2 years. So that's not something that we had anticipated. Even going back last fall when we put in this LRIP application, oil prices weren't as significant even back then. So it's gone up very significantly, very fast. So those two issues combined essentially has contributed to our project being over budget, so to speak, and we need to kind of figure out how to move forward with the project. Also, we need to move forward with the project if we're going to do the project very soon, because we're getting into later spring now. We need to put those plans together, get it out to bid, and have sufficient time to actually complete the project, this year before we get into the fall, which is crazy to think about right now, but it'll go quickly. So anyway, so that's kind of where we're at right now. So our consultant partners at Bolton & Menk have been looking at some options for the retaining wall work in particular up and around the corner. The first option is a it's called a big block type modular block retaining wall. And so that's generally gravity system. So the gravity of the blocks, as they're humongous blocks, they're, 150-pound blocks each or something like that, is enough to hold up the road weight, essentially. Contrast that with a different type of retaining wall. It's called cast-in-place concrete retaining wall. So that would mean essentially you put up forms, you bring in the concrete truck, they pour in the forms, and then you have a cast-in-place concrete retaining wall. And we also are looking at, too, if we're thinking about this this area up here, we want to make sure we're planning for the future as much as possible. We don't just solve the problem that's right in front of us, but we also try to anticipate if there are other things we need to accomplish with this project, that kind of thing. And one comment that we've heard from the community in various locations is there's a disconnect right now between the downtown area and that area on top of the hill with non-motorized transportation. And obviously there's only so many ways you can get from point A to point B, given that we have our topography, our wonderful hill, in Hudson. There's only so many ways to get around. And so one thing that we're considering is now the time to at least provide that space for a potential future trail, kind of connecting that area through there. We wouldn't be putting in the trail at this project, but at least if we're going to build the wall now, that we can provide that space for when the trail does go through, sometime in the future, hopefully, that kind of thing. So we got the big block wall and we got the cast-in-place wall, and then the options for the placement would be essentially as is today or 12 feet out, so that we can accommodate that extra width for a trail in the future, that kind of thing. So those are the four options that are laid out in your packet there. The cheaper options are essentially the walls that are in the location as they are today are cheaper than pushing the wall out because the extra 12 feet you're gaining also means you have a taller wall because you're going down the hillside, so you're building the wall taller to make that level landing spot for the path. So that's shown through the cost of the wall options in there. So the cheapest option would be the big block type retaining wall in the location essentially of where it is today. That's a little over $500,000. A cast-in-place concrete retaining wall in the more or less same place it is today is about $625,000. Big block retaining wall 12 feet out to accommodate that trail would be about $1.3 million, and then a cast-in-place retaining wall 12 feet out from where it is today would be about $1.1 million. And so the extra cost, like I said, is due to the height generally of the wall through there. If we were not to build that extra 12 feet of space in there now, there is probably some ways we could get that in there in the future. It would essentially mean more or less either a kind of a boardwalk or a bridge kind of thing. You could either attach it to the wall or have it kind of floating to the side of the wall, that kind of thing. Unfortunately, I did not get the budget numbers for that today. Asked our consultant for that, and I didn't get it in time for this meeting. So I would anticipate that adding that, we'll say boardwalk, I'll call it a boardwalk. I don't know if it is a boardwalk, but we'll call it that for now. Would probably be more expensive to put tack on later in the future, just because it'll probably be up high because it have to be next to this retaining wall. And also doing things separate from another project also generally makes the cost higher, but that's just my inclination, I guess, as to what it would be. I don't know exactly. Is it going to be twice as much? Is it going to be 1.5 times as much? I don't know at this point. So, and then, so moving forward to this project, there's a few different alternatives I laid out here for the timeline of the project and kind of the scope of the project, knowing that we have some of these constraints that we're up against. So the first alternative would be essentially keep the project scope, the same size. We're doing the same project as we always anticipated, and then request a special bond to cover the cost difference. So depending on which option is chosen for the retaining wall, that would no matter which option is chosen for the retaining wall, there would have to be some initial or some additional bonding to make up that cost difference. It varies from $300,000 to close to $1 million or something like that, depending on which retaining wall option is chosen. The second alternative would be to keep the original project scope and then move funding from other projects to put towards this project instead. So some projects that we would look at, downsizing or eliminating completely from this year would be some alleys we were looking to repave, the sidewalk and curb and gutter annual program that we usually have each year. We look at some other stuff too, but those would be some of the options that we would look to divert money anyway from other things. I don't think we really have cost savings in other projects right now to apply towards this. So, the third alternative would be to shrink the project scope to fit within the project budget. So, generally, that would mean shrinking the limits of the project to just be essentially right around that bluff area up on the top. So, we would not be repaving the hill part here up to wherever that line would be. We'd have to kind of see where that line would be, but somewhere, essentially you could just think about just around the bluff, getting that completed to shrink up the project area there. And then the fourth alternative would be delaying the project until 2023 or whenever, and include the additional project funding in the next round of budget, or CIP type stuff. So that usually comes at the end of each year. So and our overall CIP is expiring at the end of this year anyway. So we would be talking a lot about this at the end of this year anyway. So the downside, so I guess the positive side of that would be, prices could come down for oil-based products. We're probably on the high end, I would hope, at this point in time, but you never know. I hope anyway, and it would give us, some more time to narrow down some of those options and maybe, discuss further, how to get the pedestrian bicycle accommodations, up the hill in some way, shape, or form, that kind of thing. The major downside of that would be because of the deterioration around the corner, we would probably be closing part, if not all, of the road through that bluff section on the top because of how deteriorated it's getting up there. And so we could cross that bridge when we get to it if that's the committee and council's desire to see that, but that would be kind of the drawback of that option. So and like I said, we need to make some decisions so that we can keep moving on this project. If it is getting it done this year in particular, we need to make some decisions now, and then if we are choosing to delay the project until next year, at least we have some direction and know where to go with it. So, or we could look at other projects to fill that void for this year, so that we can continue to improve our community in just a different way than what we're looking at right now. So, I had a question earlier today about the grant funding. Does that need to be expended this year right away, that kind of thing? It does not with the LRIP program, so we have a few years to expend that money. We do need to have it fully expended. I believe it's within 5 years or so from now, and so delaying until 2023 is probably not a big deal. Delaying further than that might be starting to get a little bit bigger of a deal. Yeah.
But that LRIP grant is for this stretch of road only.
Yes, the LRIP grant cannot be transferred to something else. Yep, exactly. Thank you for pointing that out. Yep.
A few questions for you, if I could.
Yeah.
So with the costs that you have listed in this document, does that include, so that final number that you have under each option, has the grant money of $493,000 been deducted from that amount? Or is that what our total cost would be after their match?
No, so it's not been deducted from that amount. So I just wanted to put, comparison apples to apples together for that. So, yeah.
Okay. And so with respect on if we went with alternative 4, delaying
Yep.
and closing that road, I'm thinking that's because it's a public safety issue.
Right.
Okay, so just to put that out there, I'm not comfortable with that. If that's a public safety issue, that's concerning to me. And then one other question, when you and I went and took a look at it, what if we did do bonding, kind of what that impact would be to our taxpayers then? Yeah,
so I did not have time to do that. So
Sorry.
What I will do is I will pass that along to you guys after the meeting. So we do have some preliminary numbers from when we were talking through the transportation utility stuff, and I believe that may have changed a little bit as interest rates have gone up now.
Right.
That could be a little bit different than what we had talked about before, but at least can give us a rough idea of what that may be. So let me see if, while you guys are talking about it, let me see if I can look that up if I have.
But you are looking for action tonight, some
Yes.
kind of move forward.
Yes.
I'll turn it over to my colleagues and see what they have to ask.
So one thing that I will say about the special bonding is the committee should be aware of other projects that we have been discussed at the council level outside of this one in other districts, right? And so, there's certain projects that are kind of coming through the pipeline that we kind of had anticipated that we're going to bond for this next bonding cycle, which we discussed in the fall. So if you do a special bond on this one, that takes away from projects that we have been discussing, and it kind of undermines those discussions that we've had up to this point.
Yes.
So just be aware of that. Obviously, to kind of oversimplify this, what Dean had just said is we roughly have about $1 million between our bonding and the grant permit. All right, we got $1 million right now. And so the retaining wall, the cheapest option, is about $500,000. Okay, that's to basically replace it where it's at. So you basically have another $500,000 to get as far as you can down that road. Okay, from basically where the nunnery is down the hill, and that's kind of what we have in our pockets right now. Mm-hmm. Anything above and beyond that, that's where we're going to have to run into these other alternatives that we may,
Because we had already planned to bond for some of it?
Yes.
Is that correct?
We did bond for this project.
Yes.
We already have that money. Yep.
As a new member on the council, I'd like to have clarification of how much bonding. I understood from listening to a prior meeting that we're maximum is 120 million, but you should stay under 50%, or can you give me those figures where we are right now?
It's like overall bonding?
Yes, overall for the whole city. Do you know?
I don't know. No, that's a finance director question. I'm sorry. I don't have the answer. And I don't want to tell you something that's completely off base.
But people have been watching that so that we stay under, because that affects our bond rate, correct?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yep.
Well, I wanted to comment on the trail. I'll try to use the right terminology. I was going to say walking path, but that's a very difficult, that curvy, the blind spots. I raised my 2 children in a neighborhood adjacent that we would have, wanted to go downtown. We never went down that street. Of course, now there's signage to say that it's not safe. Yeah. We would go down 7th Street or something like that if we wanted to go ride our bikes. Getting back up the hill was the challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
But so I'm concerned that it still might not be very safe, even though that road is improved. And I spoke with you today, Dean, about some kind of a barrier, as was discussed on the 11th Street Bridge, for that protective factor. But, people drive fast, and you're coming around a corner, especially people that aren't from Hudson, don't know what they're getting into when they head down that street. So I have concern about that, and also have concern about how we're going to connect any walking path that we put on that curve or trail to the existing sidewalk that's adjacent to the old fire hall. How are we going to make, that connectiveness so that people, because that's been the challenge again up at Cooley and 11th, where people are saying, gosh, we can't get over that intersection. We want to walk to the post office or wherever. So I think we have to keep that in mind as we're developing. And I know we have a whole committee that's designated and, focused on making those paths available, or those trails, and to enhance that, because I think it's widely appreciated and desired. People want that in our city. And I'm all for that, but I do wonder if spending the extra money now on one that hypothetically may not be the greatest choice, it might be better to spend that money on other real needed projects in the city if we were going to bond, or as Mike pointed out, there's already maybe some tentative commitments that we've made as a council. So that's my concern. Is it going to be a safe trail and a usable trail? And how connected will it be?
Sure. Yeah, and just to clarify, with this project, we wouldn't be constructing the trail all the way through there. So that would have to be a later
You're right,
project.
so it is for the future.
Yep.
And again, I
Yep.
mean, obviously we do want to plan for the future and sketch things out and take that big picture view, that bird's eye view, which I appreciate that you're thinking that direction. I do wonder if it will come to pass and really be fruitful. I don't know if it'll be a path that's used just because of those blind spots there. That's my concern.
It would, if I understood correctly, you were looking at 12 feet, so it would be pretty substantial a ways away from the road.
Yeah, so, and you can see this in some of the documents if you had it up. There would be a concrete barrier between the vehicle traffic and the trail area. I believe that concrete barrier is at least 3 feet tall, so it's not wimpy, essentially glorified curb. It's like a real barrier.
Sure.
Not to say that, people, there are definitely perceptions about, safety in particular, and that, perceptions do matter because it does, if you're perceived at least to have an unsafe environment, people won't use it. I can totally understand that. But that would be, if we did put that trail in there, that would be included as that barrier would be between. So it wouldn't just be wimpy or anything like that. It'd be a pretty substantial barrier.
Pretty safe.
Yep.
And one of the principles when we look at the comprehensive plan that our residents have asked us specifically deals with connectability. It's principle 6, safe, accessible places. And the residents who have been part of this and what was approved through the council have asked that this be a priority. So I think I hear your concerns and understand that. But I think as we're thinking about towards the future and wanting to have more walkability, more bike-friendly options, I think if we're going to do something, it makes more sense to do it at this point than add it in at a later point when it could be even more costly, if it's just another perspective.
Yeah, I think kind of going through the old cross out, and then see what we're left with. I assume this, one of the options was kind of see what we have as far as money and build all we can and stop. In your opinion, that sounds like a Band-Aid to me. Would that get us what we need just for the wall? It almost sounds like that project is not, the limit of that project, just the wall is, we might not be able to afford that with what we have. Sure. And like you, Sarah, I think that it's, we've been asked about trails, and that goes beyond just a neat way to walk. The idea of transportation around the city, other methods of transportation. I'm a big believer in spending a few bucks now to make it easier for the future. To go back in 4 years and try to cantilever a hanging bridge, and I don't know how feasible that is. And trust that you're kind of balancing all that back and forth too.
We're trying. Yep.
So that's attractive to me to kind of rough in, if you will, this thoroughfare, especially if it's not just, hey, another path on another road. This is a pretty unique spot. You can go all the way down in town and up the hill, or you can go up Cooley, another tough one to get up, walking and biking. Mm-hmm. However, this opens up a lot of more of I'll use the term artery. I know that's an engineer term, but so there's some attractiveness in that. And it looked like in the bids too, there was more than just, I used the word rough in, it seemed like a little bit more than that. It almost is like we're laying a trail. There's gonna be safety railings included and all that stuff. I'm guessing if we're gonna build it to that, we have to make it safe, even if it's not a full trail. So again, kind of looking to you guys for guidance, I think that makes sense to me, kind of roughing in what's going to get us closer to some of the goals that we promised the citizens. So,
Mike, you had mentioned roughly $1 million. So if we look at option 4, it's 1.1.
Yeah.
So if we were to allocate, skip some of those other things like alleyways, I'm just saying if, okay, pause on the alleys and sidewalks, how much?
So our alleyway program has $80,000 in it.
Okay.
Our sidewalk and curb and gutter program has $75,000.
So if we did that, we wouldn't step on anybody's, it'd be, the council would likely be okay with that because we wouldn't be impacting any of the other projects that we're bonding for. Is that true? Getting back to your concern that you shared earlier?
Oh, earlier? Yeah, it's obviously there's been a lot of discussions with residents as far as sidewalks are concerned and repairing those trip hazards that we have. Mm-hmm. To pull the rug out from underneath all those conversations is difficult.
Got it.
If we were to do that, and alleyways, and you're aware of alleyways, I said that's tough to do because we actually have money dedicated for alleyways to start to repair them. It's been a long battle to get those funds there. It's like, let's use. So, it is doable. It is feasible. We haven't bid those projects yet. We can walk back that, but if you take the $1 million that we have plus the extra, let's just 150. So you're at 1,150,000.
Right.
You're still short of. You're close.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's only the retaining wall. You're not addressing the roadway, anything.
Yeah, and I would say, say we chose the option 4 for retaining wall, it's 1.1 million. Doing the street part through that area would probably be about $200,000. So it's close to. So you see in the funding portion of the issue sheet, the pavement reclamation and repaving is $373,000. That's assuming the entire project. And so that around the bluff area is roughly half of the project area or length or whatnot. So it'd be about $200,000 instead of $373,000. So if you add 1.1 million plus 200,000, that gives you close to $1.3 million, something like that.
Okay, so I'm seeing that now, like here, when you look at total cost, then realistically, we're talking 1.8. Is that what am I reading that correctly?
So that 1.8, if we went with the option that we would shrink the project so that we're not doing the hill part here, essentially, we'd take about $200,000 off that project cost, so it'd be about 1.65, something like that.
Gotcha.
Getting back to the trail, could you explain how you will connect from the corner of Walnut and 3rd up to the Carmichael?
Eventually.
Yes, please explain the full path to me.
Yeah. So what we would need to do to make that connection actually go through is that, excuse me, so the sidewalk stops once you get all the way up the hill and kind of through that last house there. It's where the sidewalk stops. And so right where that guardrail starts is where the sidewalk stops. Excuse me. So in order to get that trail through there, there is a portion of that behind the guardrail that is flat already. We probably have to fill in that a little bit to get that wide enough to get the trail through there, that kind of thing. And then once you get past that guardrail portion, it turns into a retaining wall that is right next to the house that's up there, 101 3rd Street.
And who owns the retaining wall?
It's on city right-of-way.
Okay.
I believe, and it's holding up our street, so I think we would be on the hook for that retaining wall, if I remember correctly, according to our retaining wall policy.
I beg your pardon to interrupt you. I thought you said earlier today that belonged to the residents, that retaining wall belonged to them.
Yeah, I think that would be our responsibility is that
Okay.
retaining wall. Yep.
Is any part of that retaining wall private to the residents?
I don't
The
know.
101 South 3rd?
Yeah, we would probably need to look into that a little bit more, but I believe that from all I can tell, that entire retaining wall there is within our city right of way.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for clarifying that. I didn't understand.
Yeah, and I say that being it's an old part of town, so we don't have a lot of like the property irons and stuff still out there, so we would have to probably confirm that, but I would assume that is all within our city right of way. We probably look to bring that trail down closer to the house so that we would not need to modify the retaining wall that's alongside that house. It looks like, according to our information, that we do actually have a fair amount of right-of-way adjacent to the wall, that we could get that trail. It'd have to kind of go down and back up, if that makes sense. So the trail would go right by the house and then come back up to street level by the time you get to the bluff area. That's where it would go alongside the road again.
Okay.
There is a little bit of extra work that would be needed to make that trail continuous through that area. And then once you get past the bluff area, assuming we built that extra width in there or whatever, we would then have to, at least kind of connect that to something on the Laurel side, whether that's just, kind of ending it at that alley that leads to, is it Williams Park down the way there?
Sure.
That small park there, that kind of thing. That'd probably be a logical place to stop until we have another connection at some point in time, but at least that gets people through that area. It's a wider street there, so at least somebody could bike in the street or that kind of thing at that point. Anyway, so that's just an idea of how we might make that happen. Yep.
So if the sidewalk ends at one of those houses, and then and I'm not asking to pile on this project, but what percentage is completing the trail, a usable trail, be to this? If we've got the equipment, we're repaving, we're putting safety railings in, etc. Is that just completely a different project? Given the idea that on the top of the hill, you might just lead that back out into the street where it's flat and there's no curves and all that. How much more would that add to the project if that was done while you're doing that?
We have not scoped that out, so I hesitate to give you an
Is that
exact
bigger than
number.
I'm thinking it is, possibly?
It's large.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be in six figures somewhere,
Okay.
Yeah.
probably.
That's a good estimate for
Yeah.
to answer my question. But I just thought that if we're gonna rip everything up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good question.
And two other clarifying questions. The property owner on 3rd Street, is this something that we've shared that we're talking about this? Because I know you said we have right of way, but have we?
We've not specifically broached that topic with her because we've not talked about it here
Okay.
yet. I
All
don't
right.
want to get too cart before
Right.
the horse with that. But if that is something that the committee desires to move forward with, we would definitely be talking to her about it, because it is one thing, we have the right of way, so we can do whatever we want, but it's also like, we want to be good neighbors,
neighbors.
and stuff, and make sure she's aware of what's coming, or if she has any concerns that we can address those, that kind of thing.
And then where you had, listed that your recommendation is for us to consider, which is option 4 with alternative 1. And that goes back to keeping the original project scope, and request special bonding to cover the cost. Now, I just want to clarify, because I think, and I'm thinking perhaps I'm misunderstanding, if I understood correctly, if we did that, that would take place of some of the other projects that have already been approved on a council level.
That had been discussed.
Not been approved necessarily, yeah.
That have been discussed, and people think, current elected officials think we're moving forward with those other items. So this, we would have to.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just throw this out there. Obviously, this is a very intricate project with a lot of moving parts, trail, no trail. It's unfortunate that the original bonding that we did for it didn't match what the estimates or what the project estimate came back at, and it's kind of what has put us in this predicament. Our next scheduled meeting, and Dean, you can chime in if this is too long. Our next scheduled meeting is May 16th, so it's only a couple weeks away. So I don't know if that 2-week delay would cancel the project this year, or if we table this discussion, get some more information, bring it back on the 16th, is that feasible to do and still do the project?
Let's see here. I'm just running the schedules through my head here.
Because does it still have to go back to council at
It would
large?
still have to go back to council, and that's the
So-
following Monday. Yep.
So we have to approve it first and
And then
then.
then it has to go to
and they
council
do.
for final, correct.
We wait until
So
the
any
16th.
decision,
So I think we could still make it work for construction for this year. It's just getting a little trickier, and hopefully we have a good fall and weather, to finish out the project and all that good stuff. So,
Well, and unfortunately, we do
Yeah.
have that safety issue with,
Yeah.
it's evolving in front of our eyes, which I would just want to say on the record that if any point you decide that that road needs to be changed to a one-way, absolutely need to do so for public safety. I mean, if we have a big rain or something that's changing the
yeah.
nature of it, hopefully not.
Yeah, and that's my biggest concern is if we get a 4-inch rainfall or deluge, and all of a sudden you come in the next morning and the road is completely
Oh,
gone,
yeah.
or that's my biggest concern.
We got to
because
watch that.
Have you walked up there to see it?
Yeah, well, I've driven by. I'm not gonna walk up there. Yeah, I'll fall over. No,
I made
yeah.
Dean
we took our
walk.
I
lives in
walked
our hands
yesterday.
today to walk up there, but
I tried to take my dog
It
up
is
there. It was
sketchy.
Yeah.
interesting.
No, I mean, the trees are giving the sign that they're going, they're falling.
Yep.
So it is one of those roll the
Yeah.
dice things that, not all projects have this ticking time bomb behind us.
Right.
That's, we can't kick this can down the road, proverbial road very
Right.
far.
Well,
for
then
very long.
the other thing too is, we can get input from the Bike and Ped Committee, or at least Tiffany, as far as what they've discussed with that stretch of road, if that's been identified in the Bike and Ped Master Plan or not, that's being finalized, to see if that is a connection that they wanted to make at some point in time, if it makes sense to do a trail, or they haven't even discussed it because of
Right.
the grade. I mean, that's the other thing
Yeah.
too, we can reach out to them.
Yeah.
Sarah, you're on that committee, but are you just joining it right now?
Yes.
So, yes, and I did reach out to Tiffany, and she did say that they're finalizing the plans.
Yeah.
I don't think there's been a meeting date set, but as soon as she has the plans finalized, we're going to connect on that. So,
Yeah.
Well, I want to throw out one other thing just for being really thorough. And Dean and I did have a good conversation today, and I appreciate all your time. Is there any, and I realize this puts the brakes on in a way that we don't want, but should we be looking at the sewer line and the water line while we're doing this project? Part of that big overview of our infrastructure is where are the hot spots, the red places that really need work? And should we be doing a full reclamation without addressing that?
Yeah.
Again, hate to throw that out here
Yeah.
tonight, but I just wanted to ask.
Yeah. So while we were talking this afternoon, I did look up what the ages of the utilities are out there, and I believe it was in 1932. So 90 years old. So that's approaching the end of their lifespan. Kind of when we had, scoped this project, we had anticipated that the road work was going to allow the project, or allow the street to last for, say, 20 more years until we would fully rebuild the road, including utilities and stuff. So then the utilities would be about 110 years old, something like that. That's like, I don't know. It's yeah, it's a little bit playing with fire with that too, to some extent. You just never know with utilities how long they're gonna last. It could last for a long, long time. It could last for not that much longer, that kind of thing. I will say with the project that we already have scoped, our water department has asked us to replace a hydrant up there and also a valve that is not working. So there are some things that they know about up there right now that are deficient that need to be addressed, as we do this project, that kind of thing. So I would certainly not be opposed to replacing utilities up there based on the age. I just know that our water and sewer department has not budgeted for that
Right.
At this point in time. If we wanted to go that route, that might be something better suited for if we waited a year to do the project and fully redid it. That might lend itself more to that.
Thank you. And could you tell me again, I am just learning what the terminology would be. So this was a full depth reclamation. And what's the terminology for all the way down?
Yeah, so that would be a full reconstruction all the way down.
Full reconstruction is deeper. So this isn't that. Okay,
yes, so
thank you.
A full depth reclamation is essentially, reclamation means reclaiming the pavement, grinding up the pavement, and using that as...
rather than a mill and overlay.
Yep, so a mill and overlay is just essentially doing a reclamation, but just on the top layer. And so this, because the pavement is deteriorated enough out there, we had to go all the way through.
Thank you. That makes sense. And really, so we don't have, I mean, we're really going to have to put the brakes on. And right now, the Hudson Water Utility has not indicated that this is a hot spot that they're worried about.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
What's your flavor? Welcome to the Public Works Committee. Starting off
Thank
with...
you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
All hot.
Exactly. We got a road falling off the hill.
Yeah.
First meeting.
Yeah, other than that, yeah.
Other than that, it's great.
So if we waited until May 16th, okay, so we have a city council meeting, full group, May 2nd.
Yep.
And then, so the next city council meeting is May 16th. When is our next public works meeting?
So our next scheduled Public Works Committee meeting should be
The 9th?
Monday, May 9th.
Monday, May 9th.
So 2 weeks from today.
So we could...
And then it would go to in
and then
front
we
of
could go to
council on the 16th.
Okay, that's okay. And you think if you gathered more data and information for us,
Yes, if for 2 weeks, I think we can.
you don't think it's going to be a...
It'll be a stretch anyway, so 2 more weeks isn't
Unless
gonna.
if we have a monsoon, everybody needs to...
Well, yeah, you never know, but yeah, I don't think it's going to be substantially different if we waited, 2 weeks versus making a decision tonight. But especially given all the juggling balls up in the air and stuff like that, I can understand why 2 weeks from now would be wise.
So by delaying any decision, let's at least give Dean a list. What are we going to gain in the next two weeks, whatever it is? You talked about the bonding cost to the citizens.
Yep.
Yeah, bonding cost to citizens.
You could have a concept of a comparison of creating a path from in 5 years versus roughing one in versus we already know what it's, if we avoid that, because I think that's helpful.
And I think we wanted to hear from Tiffany if this was even on the radar screen for the Bike and Pedestrian Committee.
Right. Yeah, it could be interesting to see because, they have been working on this plan and they did a bunch of community outreach pre-COVID and during COVID. And I haven't seen the plan, the draft plan yet. It would be interesting to see if this was even on their radar to put a trail system in on this stretch of road, seeing that it is such a, let's be honest, it's a challenging road to come down, whether it's an off-street trail or someone on the road. There's a reason why we have posted on the top, pedestrians find an alternative way to come down this hill, right? So we don't want to set ourselves up for something that is going to be dangerous in the future. But
Joy, do you mind if I bring up our other thing we talked about just briefly on our conversation today, Walnut Hill, using that as more of a ped bike connection than...
Well, I was thinking of several, again, remembering back to when I was riding bikes or doing things with our kids, and we would sometimes go from Laurel 7th. That is actually, there's always going to be a little hill. But 7th goes down to Locust, which just lands you in a really nice, quiet street. There is a sidewalk on both sides. I don't think there's much traffic there. So if we were trying to, mark and highlight where are safe places to go in town, are they a designated path or trail? Maybe not that's separate and divided, but where is an option? That was one, but I had also mentioned to you when we were talking about going, either going into Prospect Park, up the hill there and down. Does it 6th and goes around the corner? It's a one-way coming up, but I don't know how many cars even drive that straight.
not very many.
That could we
I like
make
that
that a recommended pathway? for pedestrians and bikers.
And that certainly needs a rebuild
that's-
anyway,
yeah.
too. So
It's what, I'm sorry?
that needs a rebuild, too.
Is it? Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
And I know when I bike, because that's
You go.
right in the corner where I live, that's exactly the route I go, up through by
you?
Burkmost Park.
You can get up in that way.
I do. Yeah. I don't go down that hill that you're mentioning
No.
that goes to, is that the 7th Street? I don't hit that one just because that's such a steep hill down. But there are nice sidewalks on
Yes.
Locust Street on both
Yes,
sides.
there are.
There are.
7th goes down pretty steep, it's true. 6th also, though, that's the one that's, you know, and a lot of people don't even know that street is there.
Yes,
It's on
yeah.
the backside of
Yeah.
Prospect.
Yep.
And you go down, and there's a sharp turn there, and then down to Walnut. I guess it becomes Walnut, does it, at
Yep.
that point? Okay. When it turns,
That's a
look on
good
my
idea.
phone.
That's a great idea.
But, I mean, I just thought of that as an alternative that we could use right now, too, as we're just saying, here's where you go. You know, here's places where it's safe to go for a bike ride or to walk, to sort of highlight those streets that are a little quieter or do have a sidewalk. Anyway, because I support that idea, absolutely, and I know the folks in those neighborhoods want those access points, safe passageway, so.
So are you looking for a motion to hold on making a decision until we have additional data and that we'll meet on it on May 9th
Yeah.
to finalize it?
That sounds good. And if you guys think of anything else that you want presented at that meeting, if there's any more information that'd be helpful, feel free to reach out, an email or something like that, so we can get it together for that.
Was that your motion, Sarah?
Yeah. I'm making a motion that we table this until our May 9th meeting.
Second that motion?
All right. There's a motion second on the floor. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. All right, item 5C, discussion and possible action regarding LOEs for topographic surveys for potential 2022 bill projects.
Okay, we got all the acronyms going on here, so for the benefit of those who are new, LOEs stands for Letters of Engagement. So that's essentially just contracts with our consultants to do this work that's identified. And then the BIL stands for Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. So if you hear federal infrastructure bill, you know, kind of going around out there, that acronym means that. And I know all of you to some extent have been caught up on a little bit of what's going on with the federal infrastructure money, but for the benefit of those listening or whatnot, so the city recently applied for some grant funding assistance for some projects with the federal infrastructure bill. So how Wisconsin has chosen to divvy up this money is kind of in two parts. One is the federal fiscal year 2022, and part two is the rest of the time frame for the bill. So federal fiscal year 2022, what they're focusing on is essentially projects that they can get out the door and constructed very quickly, because they have to encumber the money through the federal process, and it takes time and all that sort of stuff. And so they have to be projects that are not complicated. So things like repaving, you know, existing streets, you know, could be adding a sidewalk like we have on one of these, but things that aren't going to go outside our existing right-of-way, things that are going to be quick to, you know, put plans together, that kind of thing. So we recently applied for some grant funding for the projects that are listed on the sheet here. 11th Street from Wisconsin to Cooley, doing a mill and overlay and then extending the sidewalk on one side, probably the west side, I would guess, from Cooley up to Wisconsin Street to allow for safer pedestrian and bicycle travel through that area. 17th Street from the north intersection of Laurel Avenue to Cooley Road, and that would entail, again, a full depth reclamation, so grinding up the pavement and adding some speed calming measures, as we talked about at this committee before. Laurel Avenue from Blakeman Boulevard to the north intersection of 17th Street would be a mill underseal and overlay. So a mill being grinding off the top layer pavement. Underseal is something we're trying for the first time, would be essentially adding a seal coat on that surface and then overlaying that. The reason for that being is that there's a lot of cracking already on that road, and so we're kind of trying to see if that will minimize the cracking that comes back through, called reflective cracking. Carmichael Road from I-94 south ramps to Riverview Drive, milling and overlaying the street there, doing some pedestrian safety enhancements, and then replacing the existing trail, and then extending the trail essentially from Albert Street to the Mayor Road intersection and connecting into the new trail by the Lee property. And then East Canyon Drive and West Canyon Drive, kind of making that question mark shape around the Red Cedar Canyon development there, doing a mill and overlay. So if we're successful in any of these grant applications, we will quickly, because the time frame is very quick, need to do topo surveys for each of these projects in order to design the pedestrian ramps for ADA compliance. So anytime you have a sidewalk crossing a street, they have to have pedestrian ramps that are compliant with ADA standards. And most of the pedestrian ramps we have in town are not compliant for various reasons. Either they're just a little bit out of compliance or they're a lot out of compliance. So we need to address those as we go through with these projects. In order to properly design them, we need to do topo surveys for these. And then also the topo surveys will also help us to design put the plan sets together for these projects as well. We reached out to both of our usual consultants, Bolton & Mencken SEH. SEH gave us a better cost. Both consultants can do the work, so we felt comfortable with presenting SEH for moving forward with these topo surveys. We've talked to them to make sure that they are able to have the personnel on site. If we give them the green light, then we're off to the races, that kind of thing. And so, so we wanted to get these approved contingent upon receiving that grant funding, because we won't be doing these projects unless we get that grant funding, unless the council decides otherwise. So that's what we're looking to have tonight, is a recommendation to approve the LOEs contingent upon receiving the grant funding for each project. Does that all make sense? Okay.
It does, yeah. And these are useful if we don't get the grant for a particular project. They're still useful to the city. The roads aren't going away. At some point, we're going to have to do some rebuilding and some compliance.
Yeah, so at least for the future, if we do these projects, we have some idea how much it's going to cost, so we can budget that, that kind of thing. So. Okay. And in the future, since Maverick's sitting here still, we will hope to have Maverick utilized to do some of this stuff as well. So that would cut down our costs for hiring it out as well. But we're just not to the point of being able to utilize him yet, because we don't have the equipment and setup yet for being able to do that.
So for clarification, Dean, if the city isn't successful in receiving the grants, would we still look to do these surveys, or would we then hold off on them?
I would hold off on them unless council determines that we will move forward with these projects essentially 100% on our own, that kind of thing. Yeah. I'll give a little update as to the status of these grants too in a little bit, but
so we're sort of pre-approving
essentially.
If the grant
when they give us the green light, we're
push
going.
Yeah. Go. I got it.
And we're hoping to hear back in about 3 to 4 weeks if we are successful.
So you'd like a motion on this?
Yes.
Okay. I'm happy to make the motion that we move forward with the letter of engagement with SEH contingent upon receiving the grant funding for the projects detailed.
Perfect.
Above.
I'll second.
All right. Had a first and second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
So then that won't go on to council agenda until we hear from, or are we going to bring it to council?
I was going to bring it to council at the next meeting as like a consent agenda item, probably. Contingent upon getting the grant funding.
Okay. Yep. All right, perfect. Okay, thank you, Dean. Item 5D, discuss the 2022 post-construction maintenance program. So as maybe I shouldn't assume that you're aware, the city of Hudson has to apply for a permit for our stormwater discharging. It's called MS4. Mike, are you aware of it? I think you were at the meeting when I presented on
Yep,
it.
you did present
And Joy,
to the
you were
park
right there
board.
too. So you're aware of it. Okay. So every year what I do is I put forward, or between myself and the field staff, we put forward a kind of a maintenance program that we try to achieve every summer. We do have some carryovers from from the previous year that we didn't get to, so on and so forth. And basically what it outlines is, it just kind of gets you an idea of what we're trying to accomplish, how many ponds we're trying to clear out, maintain, what we need to do to them, whether it's repairing structures, bringing riprap, vegetation removal, dredging, so on and so forth. So this year we're looking at doing a number of them. Obviously, the biggest one right now is the one in the Stone Pine development, Joy, up in your neck of the woods. We actually started on that, and it's a lot of vegetation removal. The inlets and outlets of the storm facilities themselves are buried. They're probably 2 to 3 feet of silt and fill material on top of them, so you can't even see the pipe structures, which is leading to a lot of backups in the Stone Pine subdivision. And so it was much needed. We wanted to jump on it this year and try to get it fixed and repaired as soon as possible. So with that being said, other ponds are listed in the issue sheet. You know, like I said, if you have any specific questions about any of them, some of them are in Burkmo's Park, Maxwell Drive, the Hockey Center, Albert Street off-ramp, Industrial Street. We do have 118 facilities. So like I said, we kind of pick and choose kind of the low-hanging fruit ones first, the ones that are really have serious problems. And then this is funded through the stormwater utility. And so every quarter, resident is charged a stormwater utility charge. That money goes into the stormwater utility, which we pull money to maintain these facilities with. So with that being said, there's really no motion that needs to happen tonight. I just wanted to bring these items or these ponds to your attention. What I will say is, prior to maintaining any of these facilities, I will send out a letter to all the adjacent property owners, letting them know the background of the program, why we're having to do it. I'll include some photos sometime because it kind of gives a good indication of the problems that's happening, why we're having to do it. Because as you can imagine, like I said in my presentation, a lot of these people aren't aware that that's an actual pond. So for example, the one up at just south of St. Pat's Church, right? You look at that, you think it's a woods, right? And it's actually a stormwater facility. And so it's my job to communicate to the public what it actually is, why it's there, why we need to maintain it, so on and so forth. So I do send out a letter just notifying them, and there's a lot of good conversations, and it's been around enough, and I'm getting more communications out to the public, whether it's through the newsletter, whether it's presentations at council or stuff on our website, that people are becoming more and more accustomed to the program and why we're having to do it. And it's been good. The one in Stone Pine, just a couple of questions on why, you know, we're having to do it, so on and so forth. And other than that, I haven't had anybody screaming or knocking down my door like I did when I first started here. So, so yeah, I guess I will leave it at that. Any questions on the program itself? Obviously, you kind of heard my presentation. It's a DNR requirement. If we don't do anything, they will fine us. They will cite us. And then they would do a yearly audit on our program. So I don't want to do that. I'd rather not have the DNR breathing down my neck every summer. So it is a necessary evil. Obviously, it's an important part of our infrastructure system that a lot of people don't realize is there. So
I have a quick question. Under your list here, the city owns 71, 20 are private, 27 are unknown.
Yep.
And you say that Public Works is responsible for inspecting and maintenance, but the private ones, I think we talked about that briefly.
yeah.
The private homeowner association or whatever, they're responsible of doing that.
Yep.
If they don't cooperate, I mean, we're still responsible. The DNR will come back to us.
Yes. The private ponds are the responsibility of the homeowners associations. Now, having said that, the city is responsible for inspecting those facilities and reporting those facilities to the DNR.
Okay.
So what happens is our field staff will go out every year and they will go and inspect each pond. and we'll have a database of what's wrong with pond number 2, what's wrong with pond number 3. And so with that information, the city's responsibility then is to contact those HOAs and say, pond number 2 in your subdivision has these deficiencies. You have X amount of years or date,
Right.
to depend upon how severe the problem is to correct it. And if you don't, then the city has the authority to go in there, make the repairs, and bill back
Okay.
the HOA. Now, having said that, I know in our conversations, it's very hard for me to do that right now, knowing that 50% of our facilities aren't into compliance, right? I can't go out and, let's just say, for example, because you live in that district, the Red Cedar Canyon, and go in and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and it's going to cost you $200,000, knowing that half of our ponds aren't in compliance, right?
Yeah, right.
And so I want to bring our system up into compliance first before I start going out and doing those types of letters and inspections and having those conversations.
So what about the ponds where you don't know who the owners are, or it says unknown?
Yeah, so
What's that?
Yep, so those are typically, the maintenance is identified in either the HOA bylaws or in the developer's agreement.
Okay.
So for some of our older developments, we haven't located the paperwork in the city, so now our next step is to go out to the county courthouse and see if there's anything in the register of deeds, so on and so
Okay.
forth. So that's kind of what that is referring to. So that's typically a winter project.
Okay, makes sense.
So we kind of started on it this last winter. We've kind of actually whittled that down. We probably got about a dozen now that we don't really know yet. So
That was quite the undertaking for Mike and Chad.
yeah.
This winter.
Yep.
Yeah, everything's spread out on the conference room table and trying to figure stuff out. So kudos to them
Yep.
for getting that.
A lot of
done.
digging. So
There's a lot more unknowns before they spent the time to do that. So
yeah. So with that, is there any other questions that you might have on this?
For a community or subdivision that has an HOA and privately owns it, do those homeowners contribute to the stormwater utility? I mean, are they paying fees
Yep.
for the rest of the town's upkeep?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
plus
Yep.
taking care of their own.
Because a lot of times what will happen is an HOA pond will link into a public pond.
Sure.
Through overflows, through the structures, through any overflow pipes, so on and so forth. So yes, I try to think of it all as one network, but yes, there is certain subdivisions that want to control over their individual ponds. And now when it first went in, so to be honest, so if you think about it, back when like Red Cedar Canyon went in, that was probably what, mid-2000s, around there, early 2000s?
2000, yep.
Yeah, so during that time, Hudson wasn't an MS4 community, right? And these homeowners associations, like, I want our pond, I want to be able to grow trees and stuff like that, and it was fine and dandy. They didn't have to maintain it because we didn't have an MS4 program. Well, fast forward 10, 12 years later, now we're having to meet these requirements through the DNR. And I bet you if I went back to a lot of these HOAs and said, you know you have to maintain these, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars, do you still want to own it? They would probably say, nah, city, you can have it now,
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of where some of the stuff that I'm running into now.
And, we've been looking to at our, process for like new developments and stuff. Kind of maybe taking more of the responsibility on the front end because we know that probably eventually it'll come to us to have to enforce or do something with. So it makes a lot of sense for us to.
My general rule of thumb is if there's water coming from a public street emptying into this pond, the city should have control over maintenance of it.
Yep.
And it's just cut and dried that way. It's black and white.
Yep.
So, all right.
Interesting.
All right. We'll move on. So item number 5E, discussion and possible action to approve the purchase of a forestry mulcher from Tri-State Bobcat in the amount of $25,150. So this is basically in conjunction with the post-construction maintenance that we're having to do. As we're going into a lot of these ponds, we're finding a lot of undergrowth of, small buckthorn and, stuff that can't be mowed down with our brush hog. And so there is a unit that we can put on the front of our skid steer machine, our track skid steer, to go into some of these facilities and clean them up in a lot more efficient manner instead of sending out 4 or 5 guys to cut down little saplings. They make units that mulch them up and grind them up, and we actually did this in one of our ponds, Pond 141, a couple years ago. Kevin Soltis, our field foreman from the Public Works Department, went out and got a couple of quotes. The quote from Tri-State Bobcat was the lower of the two in the stated amount. And so I'm looking for a motion to approve this purchase. The funding for this piece of equipment would come out of the stormwater utility. We have, I put in the issue sheet where we're at currently. So our current line item balance is $143,000 and $143,500 in that line item.
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask a quick question. So I see it tied into some of this pond maintenance and future.
Yep.
Will there be value in that for other things along walking paths to keep it clean?
Yep.
So this
Parks, walking trails, long walking trails, absolutely. So just to give you an idea, when we did hire that company to come in and clean out a couple of ponds using this apparatus that we're looking to purchase tonight, it was $15,000 to do 2 ponds. So we have 80 some ponds. You can do the math. So it does make sense from a city standpoint to go ahead and get this on board.
I'll make the motion that Public Works should move forward with the purchase of a forestry mulcher from Tri-State Bobcat in the amount of $25,150.
I second that motion.
Okay, first and second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And then finally, the last thing under new business is item 5F, discussion and possible action to suspend ordinance 176-2 for the month of May to support No Mow May. And with that, Sarah, would you like to introduce?
You bet. And I think we've heard from a lot of people that they would really like us to suspend the rules from the ordinance 176-2 for the month of May in an effort to provide greater habitat opportunities for our pollinators, recognizing that who knows, we might not be mowing until the 4th of July.
Oh, the way it's going, yes.
But regardless, even if we are not in a position to mow, it certainly is a great way to raise awareness on providing habitat for our pollinators. I did connect with Mike on the best way if we move forward on how to implement this so that it'd be the least impact to city employees. He indicated that he was happy to have folks just call in to request to be part of this. That way we could get a sense on how many people were interested in this, whether or not we'd want to suspend this moving forward for the entire city or not. And there are, at this point in the budget, there's no budget for signage to put in people's yards, but the city does have the ability to print out the No Mow May signs and have those laminated for folks that like to participate. They can display them however they would like. So with that, should I make a motion or do we have discussion first, you guys?
You could make a motion first.
Okay. I'd like to make the motion that we suspend ordinance 176-2 for the month of May to support No Mow May. It does get tricky to say this. No Mow May in an effort to support our pollinators.
Second?
I'll second.
All right, now you can discuss if there's any discussion or questions.
And just to be clear, so this is just residents that want to opt in. Is this requesting the city and their property to not mow also?
This, the movement does not address any city properties, so this is up to individual residents.
Okay.
I wanted to ask who is I understand the nuisance ordinances are sometimes complaint-based.
Yep.
Is that true, or is there a city employee that
So there is a compliance
Enforces.
officer on staff through the police department.
Okay.
Yep. And so it is more complaint driven. Having said that, he will be out and about, and that's why I think it's important to have the registration, obviously. But if you suspend enforcement of the ordinance for the entire month of May, he's not able to issue the citations.
Right.
Yeah.
When do you think there was last a citation made for not mowing your lawn?
So there, to be honest with you, a majority of residents in the city of Hudson maintain their lawn areas. I would say last year, because what happens is the citation is ordered, the resident has X amount of days, I believe it's 7 days, to correct that citation. If it's not done in that time, a work order is issued to the Public Works Department. Public Works goes out and does, and then it's billed back to that resident. Last year, half a dozen that we had to go out and do ourselves. Probably, maybe 2 dozen that were cited. So we run into problems more with undeveloped properties.
Sure.
And there's not very many undeveloped properties in the city of Hudson. So compared to my previous place of work, Hudson has far, far less
Okay.
Citations with the weed ordinance.
And does the undeveloped property fall under that land management
Correct.
description?
Yep.
So, and that doesn't actually, the guidance for that doesn't pick up until June 30th, I think. In other words, that's when the grass is really going to grow.
Yeah, exactly.
Significantly.
Yep.
Okay. And so after, when the city staff mowed those lawns, then those residents or those property owners got billed?
Yes.
For that, is that correct? Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Well, my comments on it are mixed. I definitely support enhancing bee habitat, and I really believe in that. I think it's important, and I think there are groups in our community, master gardeners, gardening clubs, 4-H, you name it, that could certainly help contribute to our awareness of that. And hopefully, there have been some initiatives and awards given and so on for, plantings and so on to enhance the bees. My concern about it, maybe it just comes from my gardening background, and I'm far from an expert, but it's this whole project, it's choosing the month of May is part of it for me. A lot of times we have snow still in May, so of course we're not having grass growing. Other years we might have an early spring, and what is growing is dandelions. And I know I did do some reading and followed a few links, different places, to see about what sort of habitat does help the bees. While dandelions might be helpful, I think it's probably the most inflammatory plant that we might have, could I use that term, or problematic in terms of what's in my yard might affect my neighbor's yard, and they might be unhappy about it, and that's partly why that ordinance is in place. So if we did have an early spring, and we had dandelions that were blooming and heading out and scattering, that could lead to some unhappiness with neighbors. One concern I have, because I actually know someone whose yard was treated without permission by a neighbor, because it's like, oh, I see you have dandelions and I don't want them in my yard. And it might lead to more chemical use, which we'd like to try to avoid as we encourage the habitat and more natural vegetation. So that's my concern about May. I think, I understand, of course, the whole concept started in England, where they are in full bloom in March, usually, because of their climate. And even Appleton, Wisconsin, which was the first city in Wisconsin, is in a different USDA plant hardiness zone. They're 5 and we're 4. So they probably do have more things up and blooming than that. By letting them rest, we're enhancing it. So I don't know if we're really going to accomplish that much, and I do worry that we might really allow one of the more noxious plants that I think our residents are aware of, and therefore I have concern about that, that could lead to the neighbor using more chemicals in the adjacent yard because they don't like the dandelion drift that they're getting, if you see what I mean. So that's my concern, while on the other hand, I absolutely support the idea of more, and I'd like to encourage, I think one thing our gardeners and our homeowners can do is put those plants in that we know do foster. They're going to grow maybe by late June and July, but they're really fostering the presence of the bees, that they're attracted to those, and that we could work to enhance that in kind of an affirmative way also. So anyway, those are my thoughts.
Okay.
And I appreciate you sharing those. I'm thinking that this would be for 1 year, so I don't think this would be moving. We wouldn't necessarily put this in place for every May, so it might be something where we could try it for a year and see if we do get those kinds of comments and concerns. I link back to when I look at our comprehensive plan, and there again in the comprehensive plan, it does talk about environmental resiliency as a key priority. So I think it is a way to create awareness and to give our pollinators some safer places to be and protection with our colder temperatures. So that's why I'd like to move forward with this.
Sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it too. And actually, as your motion, I think you said maybe the month of May, and I don't know technically how we do that, but maybe if the motion included May 2022, with the concept that let's see how this goes. If it does come back at us with, it didn't work, it wasn't the right month, we didn't have the results we wanted, that maybe we tinker with it for other years. But as this is read, it just being suspended for the month of May, we need to put a date on that, I think.
Certainly, I can take that friendly amendment to have it be for the month of May 2022.
Okay. Any further discussion or questions on this item before I call the order? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of suspending ordinance 176-2 for the month of May, what I will say before I continue is this would need to go in front of council for discussion and final approval. So just FYI. Discussion. All right. So there is a motion on the floor to suspend ordinance 176-2 for the month of May to support month of May 2022 to support No Mow May. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. All right. All right. Moving on. Project updates. Item 7A. Dean, do you got the agenda right in front of you?
I do.
You want to rip through these, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. That's what we're here for. So go right ahead.
Okay. First project update would be the Carmichael Road and Hillcrest Drive intersection reconstruction. So as everybody knows, they started work out there on the 18th of April. It's been going. We haven't had any full rain delay days yet, so thankfully, knock on wood, that continues. It sounds like they will have all the pipe work in the intersection wrapped up, or mostly wrapped up by tomorrow, which is great. And Maverick's nodding along, so that I'm not lying. Okay, good. And so that is on schedule for what they had anticipated to be done with by now. So we have our weekly update meetings for this project on Tuesdays, so we'll know more tomorrow too. So if you have any questions about it, contact us after 2 o'clock tomorrow. I might have a better update for you, but as so far as I know, they are on schedule. Just for the benefit of everybody here, the closure period is for a maximum of 45 days, according to the developer's agreement. We're at day 8 now, so we're a quarter of the way through, something like that.
The original project scope took up the entire 45 days, but they
reworked.
They did rework it down to about 30 days. That's with everything going according to plan and no weather delays. So if everything stays dry, 30-day window. So we're on day 8.
Yeah. We don't want to promise 30 days, but if everything keeps going according to plan, that's what we are looking for. Yeah. Yep. So 45 days would put us at June 2nd to be reopened. So if you hear that date flying around out there, that's where that came from. And so the next things that we would be working on for the intersection would be grading the intersection, getting it up to be ready for doing stuff like curb and gutter and sidewalks and trails, that kind of thing. They're focused on just doing the intersection right now so that we can get out of there as soon as possible. Then after that 45 days or whenever the intersection is reopened up, they'll then shift onto the extension of the Hillcrest Drive to the east. So that is that intersection. Wista Carmichael Road Bridge Maintenance Project, excuse me. That project is going to be starting next Monday, May 2nd. That will add another wrinkle on top of that area up there. So we are anticipating that there will be some congestion, and hopefully people can figure out some alternate routes to go or wherever you're heading to. That project, I believe, is about a 3-month project for the major work of the bridge and getting all the maintenance stuff done. And then later on in the summer, early fall, there would be an epoxy overlay on the bridge deck for preventative maintenance, that kind of thing. That would be happening separate kind of from the concrete work and that kind of thing. That would be night work. That would be less impactful, different time schedule. But the major part of the project starts May 2nd. It's about a 3-month project. So 2 lanes will be open on Carmichael Road at all times. Right now there's 3 lanes plus,
2 lanes in each direction.
2 lanes in each direction, yep. And so it won't be completely choked down, but there will be congestion out there.
WISDOT did want to do 1 at the beginning.
They initially wanted to do 1 lane in each direction, and we kind of it. So
like that's not happening. Sorry. Oh man,
that would have been a nightmare. So that is that project.
Any questions on that one before we move along?
Yeah, sorry. Or the other one, the Carmichael Hillcrest one.
Okay.
No?
All right,
okay,
doing good.
Great. Infrastructure grant submittals. So as I mentioned, we were successful with the 3rd Street LRIP grant. That was about $500,000. We also submitted for a project on Locust Street for 2024. That would be rebuilding from 1st to 3rd Street in the downtown area. We are still kind of waiting. It's complicated, but we're waiting on word officially if we got that or not. This just came through today, which is great. Our grant that we submitted for the Carmichael Road Center Drive and Carmichael Road Hanley Road signal improvements, it was approved. So yay. So that will be, design will happen this year and the construction will happen next year due to the timeline and the state approvals and that kind of thing. So unfortunately it's a little less quick than we'd hoped, but
that was a 90-10 grant.
90-10 match, so we only have to put down 10%.
Wow.
Could you explain the details of that briefly?
Yeah. Yep. So HSIP, Highway Safety Improvement Program, that is a program that focuses towards safety issues that are documented, essentially. So at Carmichael Road and Center Drive and Carmichael Road and Hanley Road, we have a large problem with left turn crashes. Particularly on the Carmichael Road north and south approaches, left turning, conflicting, because Carmichael Road is quite busy, and left turns are currently permitted with a green ball at all times of the day. So what this project would do is, instead of the setup that's out there right now where they have the arrow initially coming on and then it'll go away and then it turns to a green ball and you can turn left whenever it's clear, essentially, it will change to a flashing yellow arrow setup that will also allow us at certain times of the day to just have the red arrow come up, so that will prohibit left turns at the busiest times of the day, and that will hopefully cut down significantly on the crashes that we're experiencing out there. Just to give you some background into it too, we need to have at least a 1.0 benefit cost ratio on that program to be considered. We had a 30.0 on the cost, benefit cost ratio. So we're very happy to have that project in the works. So as I started talking about earlier, the federal fiscal year 2022 bill, federal infrastructure money, we're awaiting results on 11th, 17th, Laurel, Carmichael, and East Canyon, West Canyon. We've been having some conversations with WSDOT very recently about they were asking us questions, they're asking us to give them some more information and stuff. And as we've been chatting with them, we're like, so how many applications did you get? We're kind of trying to feel out, how successful might we be? And they said essentially that our odds of approval are quite high for many, if not all, of these projects. So
Nice.
we're crossing our fingers and hoping that comes to fruition. And if that does come to fruition, I'll be a very busy person in the months of May and June. So get those projects designed, and Maverick will probably help me out with that too. But we'll know it's looking like in about 3 to 4 weeks if we are successful or not. So that will be wonderful. Anticipating that we will be hopefully getting some, if not all, of these projects. We will be scheduling some neighborhood informational meetings for these projects to let people know what's going on, that things will be coming. So these projects, if we're successful, will be constructed in 2023. So that's kind of round one of the federal infrastructure bill. Round two is that years 2 through 5. Those applications are due on June 3rd. The projects we'll be submitting for are 9th Street, streets in the industrial park area, Green Street, Fillmore and Oak behind the high school, Namakagon, and First and Buckeye. Sounds like that program is going to be a lot more competitive. So we're putting a lot out there and seeing what sticks. Hopefully we get a good amount of those too, but we never know until we do it. We'll have word back on those probably in August or so, and then those won't need to be actually designed and stuff until the future, because the funding is later on, essentially. So that is for those. The RAISE grant, we submitted 2 RAISE grants, one for the design of Carmichael Road reconstruction and expansion north of I-94, heading past the middle school and everything. And then also the construction of the Hagen Street Bridge and intersections related to that. We hear back on those in late August. So those are being reviewed right now. There's a significant boost in funding for that program this year, so we're crossing our fingers on that one too. Obviously that one's very competitive, so we would be thrilled to get any of those. There are some other potential grant opportunities out there, but kind of we've got a lot in the works right now, so don't want to get too much more busy.
What'll be interesting with these grant programs, just in general from the federal level, is there's a lot of monies that have been made available, but with the supply and demand of materials, it'll be interesting to see how that bottlenecks and what that does for projects when they're approved, because the money's been set aside and made available, right, for municipalities, states, counties, so on and so forth. But like I said, there's such a shortage of material. I mean, you can't even get ductile iron for a year, so it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Now, obviously that doesn't affect like our outcomes or anything like that, but it's just kind of me talking just to make you aware that they might approve these products, but they might have to extend the expense period or so on and so forth. But it's just interesting as we're talking with suppliers and stuff. So
yeah, it's crazy right now, the material shortages for construction materials and the prices
That's what I was just going to say. I would think that what you're estimating is it's actually probably going to be greater than what you're predicting.
Yeah, with some of these, the ones that we submitted for the federal fiscal year 2022 projects, I think I had like $80-something in there for pavement per ton. So hoping the price of asphalt will come down. There is a contingency built into each of those too, so that might eat into some of the contingency, but we're hoping we got enough. They're 80-20 match, so the state government will say, okay, you got your 80% match, then anything over and above that will be on you to fund. So we're hoping that we don't have to deal with that, but just there may
something
be that,
to be mindful of.
Yep, exactly.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's good for now for the infrastructure grant stuff. Any other questions on that?
Super appreciative of the intense work that was for you and your coworkers. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite the crazy past few months with that stuff. Sidewalk and curb and gutter replacement program.
Yeah, I guess I'll touch base on that. So early on this spring, Dean and I went around and we have a sidewalk inventory. Basically, what happened was 3 summers ago, we hired SCH to do an inventory of all of our sidewalks and trails. And basically, they went around and walked 40 some miles of sidewalks, and they basically, if they came to a lip, they marked it down, and it's all GIS, so on and so forth. So they rated them in 3 different levels, level 3 being really bad, level 1 being small trip hazards, right? So we're kind of working our way through these level 3s and picking them off as the budget allows. So Dean and I put together a program earlier this spring. I think you probably haven't had time to really work on it.
Not yet.
So it will be coming down the pipeline. Just to make you aware, what happens is Dean puts together kind of the plans, the draft plans, preliminary plans. It's brought forward to this committee for your review. And then based on that, he makes final plans, which go to council, and then we go for bid on it. So just to make you aware that that is going to be coming to this committee probably, June sometime. So probably come in June, it'd probably be bid out as a fall project. So we have $75,000 in the CIP to put towards sidewalk replacement, fix curb and gutter, putting curb and gutter where there is none, so on and so forth. So yeah, just want to make you aware of that program.
Yeah. And depending on the outcome of our conversation about 3rd Street, that may affect this project as well. So we wanted to kind of wait to get that resolved before we get too excited about the sidewalk and curb and gutter program. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to ask, because I know in general you try to avoid special assessments.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate using a special assessment on those improvements to make your money go further, or what's the plan?
Yes, so our special assessment policy for sidewalk replacements is 50%.
50, okay.
New sidewalks is 100% to the fronting property owner, correct?
Okay.
Yes.
And same thing for replacement of curb and gutter and new curb and gutter. So 50% replacement, 100% new. So
So that's the plan for this summer?
Yeah, we would follow the current assessment policy. Now, having said that, we have discussed maybe amending that assessment policy. We run into a lot of situations, especially for new sidewalks, where the adjacent property owner is footing that bill 100%. So if I come up to your house and I say, the city wants to put in a sidewalk in front of your home, and by the way, you got to pay us $2,000 to put it in, you know how well those conversations go, right?
And you have to shovel it too.
And you have to shovel it too. So there are pros and cons. Obviously, a pro to the assessment is we're able to stretch those dollars further, and we're able to do more sidewalk replacement, so on and so forth. But on the downside is the assessments are hard on adjoining property owners. So it's something that we should maybe look at. I know our assessment policy is probably in need of an update. It's probably last reviewed back in 2012 or something like that.
Well,
so
yeah.
just to kind of give you an idea. But yes, this program for this year, we would follow the current assessment policy.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
And with following the assessment policy, we have to do things like a public hearing and notifying people and that kind of thing. There's a whole process you have to follow with the state guidelines or statutes, I should say, not guidelines. There's a lot that goes into that. So people, if they do get assessed, will know that it's coming. That kind of thing. Yep.
All right. Any other questions on sidewalk curb replacement? All right. Hearing none. On to item 8: communications and items for future agendas. Anything?
I'm just wondering if we maybe at our next meeting can have an update on kind of the plans on replacing, and maybe it's something you can tell us now, the sidewalks that were damaged during the storm, and then also kind of the wrap up on 2nd Street, Highway 35, like when all of that is going to be done. And I don't know if that's tonight or the future.
Okay. I'll give you a brief update on 2nd Street. Probably not the full update you're looking for, so we can certainly circle back to that one too. But we are actually discussing with WestDOT on Thursday this week, bringing up our issues about 2nd Street, formally with them, talking with them about it. And I don't know where that's going to go, but at least the conversation will be moving forward on it. So,
Yeah. And then if you can't think of anything tonight and you have something over the next couple of weeks that you want to put on the agenda, please feel free to reach out to me and let me know. So, all right. Okay.
Well, I will make the motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, motion is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.